Hey everybody, we're doing a part 2.
Yeah, that was really long.
So, part 1, we're talking about human evolution, and we're not talking about just present day. We're talking about the past. So, I journeyed into Atlantis to have an experience, a message for all of us. And Joe journeyed into what was before the last ice age, which I think they identify it as having started maybe 25,000 years ago. So, what kind of human beings existed at that time? Because they're saying that the human race is maybe like 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years old, maybe 8,000. It just feels like the human race is truncated to the reality of how expanded and how long we've actually had a relationship with this planet. So that's what we're looking into because...
You're thinking of modern history. Like the human race has been around for hundreds of thousands of years, but modern history is only saying that we became advanced society at that time.
Yeah, we started as like real dodo brains, working with square wheels, slowly but surely. I could make just a round circle. Okay, bam. And we're slowly like evolving in intelligence to this amazing human race that we are today because we have it all figured out, right?
Well, so I just want to clarify a few things. What I think Abbey pointed out, and sometimes I don't actually explain. What I experienced was a Lemurian type society on above, and the human race got twisted into something else, and more like a gray type of reptilian. Actually, they get twisted and changed and evolved into something completely different.
So there was a race of beings. This is just kind of a quick rundown of what Joe had journeyed into.
Like, there were two beings. They were still the same race. They were still human beings, but when they went into the earth, they changed because they became interdimensional beings. And the only way they could reach the earth is finding out how to overcome that gateway. But I think over time, like... this is what they're when you look into something like this, it gets complicated because I have seen the people on the earth became more like a Lemurian society that was worldwide. It wasn't just in one spot. Lemurians were all over the world, and I'm saying that because that's what a name that everybody represents, because they were enlightened beings that were all over the world, and it prevented this other race of beings, which is part of themselves. And I'm talking like a very, very long time, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years being trapped under the earth. They became something different. Their eyes changed. Their bodies had to adapt. They actually did experiments on each other, and they became more like a reptilian type gray being. Like you could say they're very similar to the grays because their bodies became more twisted and they become more inhuman. It was very unusual. And they're not human, like what you would call the human race, as we know it now. The ancestry part of it, there's two different, very distinctive sides to this. One was very human, enlightened beings, and ones that were trapped within the earth that became full of hate and literally were still advanced, and they changed themselves to become more adaptable to the environment and became full of hate. And that's what I seen anyway.
I wanted to journey into what you saw, but I was also interested in journeying into the future. Okay, so in my Atlantean experience, so there are people who say that in Atlantis they were egotistical and they kind of created their own demise. And the few times I've been and visited Atlantis, I didn't experience them as egotistical, but quite spiritual, and really encouraging the strength of each other through what was your calling? Like, what did you want to do? Did you want to work with the plants? Did you want to garden? Did you want to build architecture? Did you want to go through spiritual experiences and be part of the ceremonies? Did you want to write? So it was as if people were born with a purpose, and that purpose was encouraged. And there was so much of a psychic sense of communication with one another, a love and support of one another, and even a knowing of what was to come. And it wasn't as if everybody knew that. That's kind of what my experience was with Atlantis. But this part of myself, actually, that I was communicating with, she was aware of what was to come. She chose to stay. and it wasn't communicated with everybody what was to come. And that was one of the conflicts that she ended up living with when she died, is feeling a bit responsible for the death of so many, which wasn't, I guess she was conflicted whether that was necessary or was the right choice or right path. But she could see the future. She could look into the future of where the human race was going, and she did not like the word human. She feels like the word human is a violation to what we are, because we're not Homo sapiens. We're not of animals. We are of a different kind. And so if we are not, if we don't have that clarity, and we are working with identities based in this way, it is actually going to weaken instead of strengthen us. And it's going to weaken our society, because our society will only be built upon the caliber of truth that we are working with. And there is a truth there. So that was what she was presented. And obviously we're in a very interesting time where the truth is constantly questioned, and then we're told what we need to be doing and what we need to be saying, and then if you go against that, then you're a horrible person. It's very confusing times right now. And so this is like this point where I'm really excited to do a bunch of journeys, but I've got to get solid here, man. So
I'll pick one then.
I had to do this with Atlantis, because it was like, should I do Atlantis at the time of the catastrophe? Should I do Atlantis before the catastrophe? So I'm going to chill and close my eyes. And I'm really thinking a lot about Joe's journey here and what he saw. And I'm also really curious about how she was looking at the future of the human race. And it's not about, it's like, what did we evolve from? And why is this our evolutionary point in this timeline? And then what is the evolutionary point that is in some future timeline? If she could see the future, then couldn't we also see the future somehow, And so I'm just curious about that. But I'm also curious about what Joe saw too. Okay, I feel called to I want to take a look at what you saw, Joe, in my own way. So I'm going to go back to what is even older than Atlantis, even older than this ice age event that started 25,000 years ago. It seemed like it started, I'm not a historian, so it's just kind of a vague.
It peaked 25,000 years ago.
So okay, so there's a lot of different things that I'm experiencing. It's not just about what you were presented with, Joe, because there's other races actually also at that time. And I mean, how do we identify that time? Was it 500,000 years ago? Was it 200,000 years ago? So in the midst of Joe's experience, there seems to be other races of beings that are different from the race that you, how could they be so different? How could they be completely different? How did they ever even start to exist? Where did human beings come from? I mean, I think is the biggest question. So when did we come from? But then where did we come from? And if we were to identify ourselves as not of monkeys, if we were to identify ourselves as something from somewhere else, then where did we come from? And what did we come from, you could say? And from what, So I'm going to, they're showing me it's not a very large land mass. It seems to be an island on the earth. And I'm going to, these beings represent really tall, giant-like beings. And what's interesting about them is how they use their eyes. And the reason why I say that is that, I'm going to have to take some time to really listen. Basically, I see beings and they keep showing me the size of a mountain. But these beings are not the size of a mountain, but they're the size of a tall tree, you could say. Like a tree in your front yard. Imagine seeing a being as tall as just your average house, let's say. And we're talking it's a 2-story house. And these beings did not identify themselves as giants, nor would anybody have given them an opportunity to think of themselves as giants. They're normal-sized people. But I'm telling you, we are a lot smaller than these beings were. These beings are tall, big beings. And they look like human beings. But there's something unusual about their eyes. Because it's not as if they're using their eyes to see. It seems like they're using their heart. And I know that it's as if their heart is an organ that this is saying so much to me. So their eyes are not as important. Their eyes are not, so we really rely on our human eyes in order to interpret our world. They didn't rely on their eyes to interpret their world, they relied on their heart to interpret their world. So their heart, in the same location as our heart, was their eyes that actually saw more than their physical eyes saw. Because I keep seeing that they see through their eyes, but it's not as important to them as what their heart saw. And I see these beings living very peaceful lives. They don't actually have any inspiration to do. I don't even feel like they eat anything. I mean, I don't see them fishing. I don't see them really killing animals or eating leaves. Like, I just see them very peaceful. Maybe that's the same inspiration that when you had seen these beings that were living on the earth that were extremely peaceful, and they were kind of, like, you could say, lazy, but they understood that life was a peaceful experience, was an experience that was beautiful. And then those beings that went into the earth were hard workers, and they were a different kind of nature of the same species that then transformed into different, through their different paths. And these beings represent being very peaceful and very, 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 very laid back. I mean, it's as strange as they could just sit in the same spot from morning until night and just be peacefully smiling the whole time, as though time didn't even exist. And there wasn't much in the way of having to, I mean, I don't see, they aren't pointing to me structures. They aren't pointing to me fires. They aren't pointing to me food. They're just pointing these big beings that have very happy faces, and their hearts are their eyeballs. That's literally what this is like. And there's a big mountain, and they keep showing me from, like, you know how you can create these illusions, these eye illusions, like, yes, they're the size of a mountain, but no, they're really just very, very big. They're not the size of this mountain, but they're more like the size of like a 2-story house. Just as that tall. They're so peaceful. It's almost, I don't even know what to make of it. So there's there's one of them, and he's male, and he has tan skin, and he has he has very tight curls, but it's like soft curly hair. And it's not like super long, but it's quite silky. I don't even know. It's like, wow, do you use, like, what do you wash your hair with? They're like, wow, so silky. But he's looking out into the ocean, and the ocean is speaking to him. And he can hear the ocean through his heart, which is his primary organ, they say, is his heart. Because his heart is his ears, his eyes, his everything. His heart. And what's the ocean telling him? The ocean is asking him to do something. The ocean is asking for his help, basically. And he doesn't ever say, there's no inspiration to question, to argue with the ocean, and to say no. He is so ridiculously peaceful, and it would be nothing for him to provide this, whatever this is for the ocean. It seems like it's to build a boat, to be honest. And it doesn't even seem like this ever came to his mind that he would ever need to build a boat. But it's very specific, and he has to really listen to his heart, because it is not within him to cut down a tree. It is not within him to even create tools. It is not within him to do these things. But the ocean is showing him exactly what to do, how to do it, and everything to do in the making of what is like a very big boat. And we're talking a big boat because he is already a big person. He is much bigger than we are. And he goes through an emotional process with this because he has to kill his friends, and the trees are his friends. I don't see there's many exchanges with other beings of his own height. He's very kind of independent. But he even goes to the very top of the mountain and speaks to the top of the mountain, specifically the top of the mountain. And when he goes to the top of the mountain, he speaks down into the inside of the mountain and communicates with who he defines as a God figure. Because he's communicating with an organ in the earth, that he really values its wisdom and its opinions about things. And he cries to this God that he speaks to. And he does. He goes to the very top of the mountain and he stays there for a long time in the process of building what is a very large boat. And this is an emotional thing. This is the first time he seems to have had a calling, because his calling was just to be very, 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 very peaceful and not even feel like, I don't know how he sustained his body or sustained himself. There's no real calling to eat food or anything like this. And the mountain does give him awareness that there's an event. It's the only way I could describe it, is that in time that there's a new blueprint, there's a new architectural design of the energy, of the energetic design of the planet, or the energetic design of how it is going to impact everybody on the planet. It's going to impact the ocean. It's going to impact their thinking. It's going to impact our calling, or what drives us, what motivates us, how we're going to grow differently. I mean, the wisdom of this mountain is telling him, is basically showing him, I mean, I don't like to use the word matrix because that means so many different things to so many different people, but let's just call it like a blueprint of some kind. And I see that the earth is absorbing a new blueprint and is actually working with a totally new arrangement of energetic measures, influences, impacts, designs. It's like a totally new style. It's like we got bell bottoms these days. Now we got, I don't know, like tight pants. So it's like the earth is choosing a new design or a new style to explore. And it was important that this man followed through with his calling, which would have been inevitable, because that's what he did. He just experienced the energies, the currents of energy in the conversation, and everything was quite simple and peaceful and joyful on the planet. But I feel that's what's interesting, is I'm starting to pick up on the sense of those beings that went into the earth. Because this super big man, he's doing as he is called, but he is very vulnerable about it. And part of what is influencing this alteration in the blueprint are the beings from within the planet. The beings that went inside the planet. And because the beings went inside the planet, there was a separation of those two expressions. And as those two expressions evolved in their own ways, they created an energetic, you could say, conflict, a friction. And in that friction, it was creating a spark or a fire, a new passion or a new birth of something. And it wasn't a birth of you could say, a new species, but the birth of a new blueprint, an adaptation, and the way the world was going to be an expression of itself through these living beings that existed on the planet. And somehow I feel that the motivation to build this boat is coming from actually something more sinister or something darker. Not because it was quite innocent in it, but it was causing him to be emotional. It was causing him to be in conflict with himself. It was causing him to follow a purpose that was difficult. It was causing him to then grow in a new way. And it was a painful way. It was working with pain, to be honest. And there was pain in the planet. And the only way for that pain to reach the surface was through the people of the surface to become in pain. And that way the pain was shared, and so that it could be properly reconciled. But those people that you came across, Joe, that were, they were not going to associate with any of those sounds, because their solution was just to turn their back on it. Basically, it was just to leave was their solution. But they were just, as you could say, there was a sickness inside of them too, because that wasn't the right solution. That's basically, we're going to do it our way. We're going to turn our back on you. We want nothing to do with you. Screw you for wanting to, and it was still a quarrel. Even when they left, it was still a quarrel. And now those that are in the planet that went into the planet by choice, but then got trapped in the planet, they became in pain. They became molded and shaped differently. And those vibrations came out through the crust and altered the beings that were at the surface. How much pain are we enduring in our present day life? Like, really, we're all in pain. And is it possible that we are still transmuting parts of our human history that could be hundreds of thousands of years old even, still communicating with us in a new way? And that this blueprint is part of this, I don't know, the thing that we're working through. But this man does build a boat. and he actually doesn't build it for himself. He chooses to stay on the island. But what he does is he builds a very large horn, and then he uses the horn in order to attract attention to him. And then people from all over this island, even other parts, the horn is so loud it can be heard for like hundreds of miles, it seems like, in every direction. And anybody who would hear the calling, which was an actual horn that was ridiculously huge and loud, would find their way to this island and to this man, and they would be guided onto the boat. But he was so emotionally distraught. He was kind of destroyed from this process. Even cutting down a tree shattered his soul to do that. And so he just wanted to remain with the island, and in a way fall asleep, because I see that people choose the boat, and the world then shifts and changes, and he goes to sleep on the planet. But he dies in kind of a sad state, to be honest. So yeah, that's what I'm shown.
Weird. It's cool though.
Yeah.
It's interesting to look at our history in different ways. Like, was this stuff really? But the question is, how could we say that a world that's so old, that we're the only race that ever really truly advanced in it? How do we know that? We know the world's been through one cataclysm after another, after another, after another, after another. So, and the world kind of goes inside out. It's constantly pulling energy in and out. It's like breathing. So anything that used to be here could have simply been pulled into the earth and then spit back out as a whole new thing. Like like our crust itself is constantly changing. You could even say, like, at one time, like a lot of the like the continental shelves were together, but what was on the other side? Just ocean. So if all this, like, as it moves apart, it pulled stuff underground. So I believe that if we were all one great big continent, and then all this continent was together, what was on the other side? I always say that to myself, because there had to be something on the other side. It just wouldn't make any sense if there was all land just in one spot and there was nothing on the other side. That doesn't make any damn sense. So as the continents moved apart, it changed everything. Like, how old and how, like, I think we have to be open to the possibilities like this. And the spirits are telling us stories that are fascinating. And to really look at ourselves and the potential of history, and how many different beings lived on this world. Why is it just the certain ones? We already know there was dinosaurs. Well, what happened between the dinosaurs and now? And what happened so even the time of the dinosaurs, what happened then? Like, could you imagine? What if? There's a lot of what ifs, and they say, well, where's the fossil records? Well, we don't know what all these jumbled things turn into. Like, maybe there's certain types of fossils that are created and other types that are not. And that's the whole thing. We don't know anything. We just assume that things are the way they are. But we don't know exactly. I know that human remains are much harder to find than, for instance, bigger boned creatures. The smaller the things, the less. But you think there'd be some form of record. And this is where a lot of the modern day archaeologists look at and say, well, there's no proof. There's no proof of this stuff. Well, if there was, for instance, if there was giants on this world, would that be released to the human race? This is the problem, is that the statement I just said is part of the problem. We don't know what will be released to us if we knew our own history, because our own governments do not tell us the truth. The people that are in power do not tell us the truth. Christianity would not tell us the truth. Only their narrative, and that was it. And if you didn't go by that narrative, you were destroyed. Records were burned. So how much of our history was destroyed? So anything's possible. Because of we don't know what the truth is, and what, even if the truth was there, what would actually be told to us. Did they find things? We don't know, because they would never be told to us. So this is the problem. So when we go in and do these journeys, it's fascinating what is being shown to us, because it creates a whole nother possibility. It's just a shame, as a society, as a world, we don't actually actively try to find the truth out. We seek out the truth just to hide it or to destroy it, manipulate the narrative, control the narrative, enslave human race. And we would never know the truth, and we never will know the truth if we continue down this path. It'd be pretty interesting if everything that was said to us in the last couple of videos was 100% factual. That would change your perspective on everything, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I find it interesting that so much of the human race from the past, they built their societies around their spiritual connection. Why in the world did they have one of those? They were just in La La Land because they had nothing else to do with their time, so they were just making up stories and just I don't know, talking to invisible people and they were just cuckoo. Don't you know that today's present day people, we don't know, we're not cuckoo. Like what we see is what is there. And anything that we don't see is definitely not there. Otherwise you need some medication. So this is what we're evolving into, a race that is completely is dead, energetically, spiritually dead. That is not alive or adventurous or passionate, spirited. Let's just be given another interesting game that fills our attention spans, that fills in the blanks of our boring, meaningless lives. And it's like this. Our societies aren't built around sacredness, aren't even built to last. Like, how many couches do you buy that hurt your butt in a few years? Like, useless crap. Let's just build more useless crap so that we can build more of an empire of money, because money is more important than spirituality, is more important than each other, is more important than the future. I would love for the human race to come together and say, what is a gift that we can give back to the future of humanity in 10,000 years? And how can we build it to last 10,000 years? And then how can we build it and keep it safe and secure so that in 10,000 years, no matter what happens, that some part, or maybe 20,000 years, that some part of humanity might find it again. If we were to lose track of it, might find it again, and then we would instill it with information that they would be able to translate, that they would be able to understand and interpret and know what we were trying to tell them from the past. How cool would that be?
And what would happen if, for instance, the world decided to just disappear off the face of the earth? In 20,000 years later, we came back. What would the world look like? Would we even know or even be able to find any remnants of us?
No.
We wouldn't.
Right.
Because our buildings will fall apart, crumble to the ground. The only reason we know that advanced civilizations lived is because of those massive stone structures that were built. Do we build anything out of stone? Everything's built out of iron. Steel is one of the things that will last the longest. But even that rusts. But the thing that the issue is that all these buildings will eventually crumble to the ground, and then it'll be overgrown and it'll be buried under the earth, under vegetation. So would there be any remnants of us? I'm not talking a couple of thousand years here. I'm talking 20,000, 25,000 years. And what happens in that time frame? Does the glaciers come in? We go through another ice age. There's a massive flood that covers almost the whole world. And then all that sediment is put over in everything that exists. And eventually that recedes, and now we're left with what exactly? What's still going to be standing? And I think the reality is that we don't know what our history was. We're not allowed to know. We're not allowed to guess outside the box. We're hunter-gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years, and then eventually became an advanced civilization.
And this is advanced as we can get it, apparently. This is like blowing my freaking mind.
Well, I mean, the idea...
We go to the moon once, 70 years ago or something? Well, and that's it.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is that we're never... We created a slave society. Even, say, Egyptians, it was about slavery. Or was it? There's actually proof that a lot of the slaves were actually workers. But again, they're still slaves. Just like us. Because we work. Do we have a choice? Because if we don't work, we will not do so well. So we are slaves to a society, an idea. Because if you go outside that idea, you're going to be punished for it. The worst thing is that right now it's becoming more and more louder, that if you step outside the boundaries, you're going to get really severely punished. And it's getting to the point now the slave society is becoming more and more obvious. And we're just okay with it, or we're just all too tired, or there's a cycle that we're passing through.
Yeah.
There is something that we're awakening with inside the earth. And it's not a good thing. Because we woke it up through fear. When you wake something up that's been sleeping for a long time, that gets woken up by fear, it's never a good thing. But there's also a bright side of it as well. Because at some point, we're going to end up moving on.
You got to face it.
We got to face it. But I mean, we don't know what the outcome of the future is going to be. Is it going to be positive or negative? It's based on our choices that we choose to do in this earth, or is it? Or is this all written already? And we only can really control what we do ourselves in this lifetime. But ultimately, what choice do we have to control the narrative of the whole human race? It's not an easy thing. The people that are in power are the ones that make the decisions. And if you got people that are in power that don't want anything except slavery and control over the human race, and that's what's going to happen. So what happens if that changes and the narrative changes, and now all of a sudden there's good that controls the world, and we can go down a whole nother level of learning and understanding. Because ultimately, we're never going to grow in any productive way if we do not work together. Because as soon as you try to control a part of the human race, there's going to be somebody else that has more understanding is going to trap us within the earth, within our own solar system. Do you honestly think if there's an advanced civilization that knows we exist, knowing that we're like a virus, they're never going to allow us to move outside of our own solar system? Or they'll just wipe us out or lock us away. And it's interestingly, the beings locked the people away and shifted the dimensional, almost like they created a whole new reality that shifted away. And they knew eventually they would shift away to the point they wouldn't be able to find their way back. Like, it's almost like when the people within the earth, the people above, created a shift in their reality, trapped them in a dimension, in their own dimensional space, like almost like a copy of the earth that broke away. And it's eventually now coming back into alignment again. It's pretty weird that you could have two versions of Earth and they're going to come together again. And then that's going to open up and release everything that's actually within the Earth that was trapped all along. What's that going to look like? Who knows if that's the truth? It's just something to think about. But maybe that's the only way we're going to be truly free.
Yeah.
Because we could have been beautiful beings that we thought we did the right thing, but all along we did the wrong thing by enslaving a whole aspect of our own race, by trapping them in their own dimensional space and off-shift it. And eventually that comes back, and then now they're not here, or they're not able to stop this from being released. It's interesting. And the only way that these beings can contact us is be able to get control over dimensional travel, which maybe they already have. They've had a long time to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is getting long, and we're just talking. And I don't know. There's a lot of things to talk about. I think more than anything I would like to see people is to just think outside the box.
And enjoy thinking outside the box.
Yes, and then treat each other equally and be respectful to everyone.
Yeah.
And stop trying to put your own ideas and force them down people's throats.
Yeah.
Because that's not being open-minded, that's being narrow-minded.
Yeah, there's a way to present your ideas without saying this is the way and the only way, don't you know? It's very eye-rolling.
Let's not go down that path. Because that's a path that's really hard to not complain about.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's all I have, Abby.
Okay. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this little extra part 2. It's really fun to look into our history and look into the energies of what creates us today. All right. Have an awesome day, everyone.
Take care.